Force. Noun. Violent action. 1. Uncountable. Violent physical action used to obtain or achieve something. The release of the hostages could not be achieved without the use of force. The rioters were taken away by force. The ultimatum contained the threat of military force. We will achieve much more by persuasion than by brute force. Plans to seize power by force of arms, by military force. Physical strength. 2. Uncountable. The physical strength of something that is shown as it hits something else. The force of the blow, explosion, collision. The shopping center took the full force of the blast. She hits the ball with amazing force for someone so small. Serrated entries, energy and physical forces. Strong effect. 3. Uncountable. The strong effect or influence of something. They realized the force of her argument. He controlled himself by sheer force of will. She spoke with force and deliberation. Somebody, something with power. 4. Countable. A person or thing that has a lot of power or influence. Economic, market forces. The forces of good, evil. Wrong is the driving force, the person who has the most influence behind the project. She's a force to be reckoned with, a person who has a lot of power and influence and should therefore be treated seriously. The expansion of higher education should be a powerful force for change. Television has become a major force in American political life. He was finally defeated by forces beyond his control. Authority. 5. Uncountable. The authority of something. These guidelines do not have the force of law. The court ruled that these standards have force in English law. The culprits must expect to face the full force of the law. Group of people. 6. Countable, plus singular or plural verb. A group of people who have been organized for a particular purpose. A member of the sales force. A large proportion of the labor force. All the people who work in a particular company, area, etc. is unskilled. See also workforce. Military. 7. Countable, plus singular or plural verb. A group of people who have been trained to protect other people, usually by using weapons. A member of the security forces. Rebel, government forces. A peacekeeping force. See also Air Force, Police Force, Task Force. 8. The forces, plural, British English. The Army, Navy, and Air Force. Allied forces. See also Armed forces. Serrated entries. The Navy. 9. Forces, plural. The weapons and soldiers that an army, etc. has considered as things that may be used. Strategic nuclear forces. Police. 10. The force, singular. The police force. He joined the force 20 years ago. Serrated entries. The police. Physics. 11. Countable, uncountable. An effect that causes things to move in a particular way. The moon exerts a force on the earth. The force of gravity. Magnetic, centrifugal force. See also centripetal force of wind. 12. Countable, usually singular, a unit for measuring the strength of the wind. A force 9 gale, a gale force wind. Serrated entries, wind. See also, toward force. Extra examples. A large expeditionary force is now being assembled. A small peacekeeping force will be deployed in the area. Competition is a force for change in industry. Deep internal forces cause movements of the Earth's crust. Even the opposition and peers felt the force of the Prime Minister's argument. Everyone felt the force of his argument. He called on the local population to rise up against the occupying forces. I felt the full force of her criticism. In the end, we had to resort to brute force to get the door open. It was as if an invisible force field kept us apart. Local parents were the driving force behind the project. More troops have been called in to support the coalition forces there. Our house took the full force of the bomb blast. Professional standards often do not have the force of law. Rebel forces now control most of the capital. She decided to join the armed forces. She used her sheer force of personality to keep the family together. She was seen as a potentially disruptive force within the party. Some archaic laws are still in force. Some laws relating to obsolete customs are still in force. The contract was not signed and has no binding force. The country's attempts to meet force with force led to the outbreak of war. The country's attempts to meet force with force, resist an attack using force led to the outbreak of war. The forces of expansion are balanced by forces of contraction. The king made laws and imposed them by force. The new law comes into force as from midnight tomorrow. The preparations emerge torn apart by external forces. The regulations allow the use of force if necessary. The sun exerts a force on the earth. The troops marched in and took the city by force. The two companies have joined forces to form a new consortium. The wind was increasing to gale force. These elite forces are the best equipped and trained in the world. This is a politician who does not like to balance market forces. Though officially retired, she remains the creative force behind the design business. UN forces operating in the region. With its new players, the team is now very much a force to be reckoned with. A UN deadline for the withdrawal of forces. A company's labor force. A joint task force. A token force of only 300 men. Hurricane force winds. Lateral forces acting on the car's suspension. People in the security forces. Powerful natural forces such as earthquakes and drought. Powerful social and economic forces. Shifts in the balance of political forces in Europe. The US labor force. The attractive and repulsive forces between individual particles. The combined forces of MI5 and Scotland Yard. The country's labor force. The decision to send armed forces over the border. The force field of a magnet. To fight the forces of evil. A UN-led task force of 28,000 troops was sent to the area. a peacekeeping force was deployed to the area. Allied forces were able to advance to the capital. He controlled himself by sheer force of will. Many social and economic forces contributed to this trend. Police were accused of using excessive force. Suddenly, it came home to me with tremendous force that this was my last chance. The country now has its own army, air force, and navy. The culprits must expect to face the full force of the law. The emotional force of the songs derives from their universal themes. The expansion of higher education was a powerful force for change. The force of the blast hurled bodies into the air. The force of this argument was recognized by the committee. The government is negotiating cuts to nuclear forces. The rioters were taken away by force. There were plans to seize power by force of arms. They see the world as a battleground between the forces of good and evil. We achieve much more by persuasion than by brute force. We had to resort to force to get the door open. We were visited by a member of the security forces.